Welcome, everybody, to Bases Loaded right here on OTF. I'm Blake Munroe, where I'm joined by CJ Vogel and Jeff Howe. And, guys, the Schloss era officially begins here in just a little bit. Texas fans very excited, of course, to see what happens not only today, but, of course, the rest of the season as well. But a good set of games coming up this weekend. Before we get to that, a little preview, though, I do want to say, Jeff, you came out on ontexasfootball.com earlier this week, talked about Max Ballou being a little bit up in the air due to having the flu, but it sounds like the expectation now is that he's going to play. So that's a huge piece of the puzzle there for this Texas team going into this weekend. And speaking of this weekend, guys, Louisville is the game tonight for the Longhorns. Of course, these games will be on Flow Sports. We've had a lot of questions about that. That's the only place that you'll be able to watch those games. But Jared Spencer will be the left-handed pitcher for Texas, and then Patrick Forbes, right-handed pitcher for Louisville. Y'all's thoughts?
You know, this is a Louisville program that I think has been, by their standards, down the last couple of years, Blake, but Dan McDonald's done a really good job with that program. I mean, actually, Texas bounced them from Omaha back in 2014. And, you think about the guys, Brendan McKay was kind of their big stud probably about, 8 to 10 years ago. So it hadn't been exactly where we've expected Louisville to be, but this is a pretty good opener. It's a really good opening weekend. Ole Miss isn't going to count against your conference record, but you don't play them during the SEC schedule this year. So you get one chance at Ole Miss, and then an old Big 12 foe on Sunday with Oklahoma State. And I'll tell you what, that's probably the game, Blake, I'm looking forward to the most from a pitching staff standpoint, because, hey, look, I know they keep losing really talented guys to the draft. Josh Holliday's done a really good job recruiting from the JUCO ranks and filling holes. Nolan Schubart might be the best offensive player other than Jace Laviolette that Texas sees this year. Big power hitting outfielder for the Cowboys. So I'm looking forward to that Sunday game. But yeah, it's good. And like Schloss said earlier this week when we met with him, he's like, hey, the good thing about a tournament Globe Life, weather's not going to be a factor. You're going to get all your games in. Just depends on start time. So it's going to be a good weekend of baseball in the Metroplex, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it in a way is its own 3-game series that you would see against an SEC opponent, right? You get 3 really quality opponents, all of which going to be contenders for, the tournament at the end of the year. I'm looking at that Sunday game against Oklahoma State to kind of get an idea of where Texas is with its rotation. I know that's kind of up in the air, as we've talked about Blake and Jeff previously, but what does the Texas lineup look like against a Sunday rotation of another quality D1 opponent? And that's really what I'm looking forward to. Of course, we're expecting the bats to be a big piece of the puzzle here for the Longhorns this year. But, if that's something that you can kind of come out of this weekend just appreciating, as Texas puts up some runs and, you can get out to quick leads, I'm all for it. You see the number 17 right there by Oklahoma State. By Sunday, what you see from a Texas starter, rotation, bullpen, whatever approach they use in that game, that'll be really interesting to see what kind of comes out of that for the rest of the season for most Sundays.
What I kind of like about it, guys, the way it's set up, in my opinion anyway, is that it gets harder as each day goes on. I think, we can all agree Louisville, probably the weaker of those 3 teams. Ole Miss, they haven't had the best few years, but they look to be a lot stronger than they've been in the past. And then Oklahoma State, just a lot of offense is what I'm expecting from them. I actually was looking earlier. They have 5 guys returning who've hit 9 or more home runs last season into that lineup. So they definitely have some power. And then I don't know if y'all know this or not. Oklahoma State's pitcher, he comes from Grand Canyon, 6'9", 233. That is a big kid.
Yeah.
They could use him on the hardwood, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's one thing, Blake and CJ, about facing Oklahoma State is Josh Holliday is always going to field a team, like I said, no matter who they've cycled through. And they've lost some really good players. Christian Encarnacion Strand was only there for 1 year and is already in the big leagues coming out of the JUCO ranks. But they always manage to score runs in a multitude of ways. It's not just the long ball. They've usually got a couple of guys at the top of their order that can run. They've usually got some multi-tool guys that maybe you'll see in the bullpen throwing at the end of a weekend that are also playing maybe in the outfield or the infield. So that's just that's kind of one of those opponents. As long as Josh Holiday's the coach there, you know what you're going to get with Oklahoma State. Like you said, Blake, we'll see what we get from Ole Miss. You put that record up there. That was a losing record last year. So we'll see what comes with the Rebels. And like I said, Louisville's looking to bounce back, but that Sunday test, that's going to be the big one. And I'll piggyback on what you said, CJ, not just from a starting rotation standpoint, but a bullpen standpoint. How much is Ruger Riojas going to be used in those first two games, and who's available by the time you get to Sunday? I think we remember last year, you had to hope and pray that Gage Bame was still, his arm was still attached to his shoulder by the time you got to Sundays. Otherwise, you may not have a bullpen hand, or that, your hitting was so superior that you could just outscore somebody in the Sunday series. We know that's not going to be the case in the SEC, and this will be a small sample of it, playing a really good Oklahoma State team on Sunday for your bullpen. And chances are you're going to be facing a starter that's probably a Friday night quality guy.
And I wanted to give you all a quick note as well on Louisville. They actually are having to replace 64% of their plate appearances, 65% of their innings on the mound from last year's team. So a good 2/3 of their production, both pitching and hitting, completely gone.
Yeah, it's when I look at Louisville and I look at Ole Miss, the funny thing that comes to mind, especially considering how eventful but one track the coaching search was to replace David Pierce, which I don't think is really a search. It was more of a recruitment by CDC with Schloss. Dan McDonald and Mike Bianco, two coaches that got hefty raises when the Texas job came open when Augie resigned, because I don't think, Blake, there's probably a coach in the Southeast, or if you were a top 30-ish program, I'm pretty sure your head coach got a raise because of the Texas job being open.
Definitely. Well, this leads me to my next question, guys. On Monday, you look back at this weekend of the 3 games, and if I asked you, it was a success because, what would be your answer?
I like this. Look, to me, it's the win-losses is obviously what you want to look for, right? You want to win these games, especially at Globe Life, a place you necessarily haven't had a lot of success at. But to me, it's holding on to leads. If you go into the 7th inning with a lead in any of these three games, and you come out with a win in any of them in which you led from the 7th inning on, that to me is a success. No blown leads, no games in which you had a lead in those games and ended up losing. That's a success for me, because that right now, again, is one of the bigger question marks that I have about this team is, what does the back end of this bullpen look like? Is it just a Jason Flores show, right? Is that just who you're going to rely on to be your closer and say, go get it figured out? We've talked about Ruger Riojas and how he's going to be used sporadically in big moments to close doors, close openings, tough situations with guys on base. That's expected. But who else amongst those arms in the bullpen can come in, give you tough outs, close doors, and hold on to a lead? If you can come away with some sort of silver lining in the bullpen for late game situations, that's a bright spot and a very much a takeaway for mine that I'm looking forward to from these 3 games to start the season.
I want to see. I've got the bar set a little bit lower, Blake. So I want to see the 2 things I'm looking for. One, I just want to see this pitching staff compete. When you got a chance with 2 strikes to put guys away, I don't care if it's a strikeout, fly out, ground ball out. I want to see guys really attack. They've been talking about it, and we met with a bunch of guys this week. Luke Harrison, Dre Duplantier. It helps to hear from the returners the stuff that Max Wiener is preaching, which, hey, attack the strike zone. Don't be afraid to go at guys. But really relaying the message, it's not that different of a message from what David Pierce and the previous staff were given. But I think the way Max Wiener is relaying the message, the tone of it is a little bit different. I think guys are a little more receptive to it. And then the newcomers, I think, really understand that. So I want to see pitchers continually attack the strike zone, limit your walks. And then on offense, same deal. I don't want Texas to come out of this weekend and us talking about, a couple of 12, 13, 14 strikeout type games.
Yeah.
Make contact, put the ball in play. Don't have any of those innings that we've seen in some of these games at Globe Life where, you give up an 8-run frame and then you're out of it, right? I just want to see guys compete. Quality innings on the mound, quality at-bats, productive outs. If you're battling and you end up, ground ball out to short or a pop out to shallow right, I can live with that because at least the guy's competing. I can't live with, staring at 3 pitches with the bat on your shoulder. I can't handle that. So that's like I said, Blake, I got my bar set pretty low, but that's what I want to see from Texas. We just compete.
So I think those are both quality answers. I think the easy thing would be to say 2-1 or something like that. But Jeff, I'm wanting, and CJ, I'm wanting mistake-free baseball. I don't remember if y'all remember that game from I think it was 2 years ago against Vanderbilt when they played in the opening weekend. It was like mistake after mistake after mistake. I mean, it was brutal, man. Just terrible.
Yeah, I was last year. Yeah.
So, I mean that, and then I'm also interested. I think it'll be third base, seeing how Adrian Rodriguez reacts to being a starter from the get-go. If there's solid play at third base, I also would consider this weekend a success.
I'll add one more. No base running blunders. No, and this is on whoever's at third base coach as well. Just making sure that guys are sent at the proper time on fly balls to center field. No more, what you would call kind of an error at third base from the coach sending an ill-advised runner.
That's important for a couple reasons. One, David Pierce was, and admittedly so, and I don't fault him for this. It's just the way, some coaches have their tendencies. He was going to be ultra aggressive, over aggressive on the bases. What I want to see is if there are mistakes, CJ, is it an issue where a coach is sending a guy, or did a guy misread a ball in the dirt or whatever? Baseball IQ is something. Schloss talked a lot this week about the mental game, and I think having Tulo on the staff really helps with that. But a lot of the stuff you hear Schloss preach, if it sounds familiar to Texas fans, it should, because he's taken a lot of – it's hard to replicate what Augie did and how Augie approached the game, but Schloss has kind of taken a lot of that framework and repurposed it to fit kind of his image and how he wants his teams to play. So I'm looking for to see where the baseball IQ of this team is right now, and to maybe watch it get on a nice trajectory throughout the year. That's what I'm hoping happens.
Well, it's going to be an exciting weekend, no doubt about that. Be sure to grab your bag of Chinook and get ready for it, guys. And it's baseball season. So like I said, grab that bag, 8 unique flavors to choose from. I know you're going to find a flavor you love, whether you're taking them to the ball game this weekend or just enjoying the ball game on your couch. Be sure to check them out at ChinookCeatery.com.
The cinnamon toast, Blake. The cinnamon toast is where it's at with Chinook.
I like that one too, Jeff.
Yeah.
Like last year, they sent me a big box of every flavor. I was in heaven all summer long. So
I just want a big box of the cinnamon toast. There's some good flavors, but you give me that cinnamon toast, I'm good.
Oh, man. All right, guys. Well, one of the other things that I wanted to ask y'all today, which newcomer will have the biggest impact this season? Whether you're wanting to pick a true freshman, a transfer, or just someone that maybe didn't see a ton of playing time, or that you expect to rebound in a big way. Who will have that big impact for the Horns this season?
I really like Easton Winfield out in left field. This is a guy who at ULM last year was a second team perfect game All-American as a true freshman. 10 homers, 40 RBI, but 18 stolen bases. This is a guy that gets on base and makes you really start to look over if you're a pitcher. You start to wonder if this guy is going to go on a given pitch, but he also has that ability to stretch with extra base hits. I think that he's going to be a nice piece in what is a very solid, deep lineup. If you can get him, in that 1-2 spot, I think you're going to have a really impressive buildup, and some of those guys deeper in the lineup are going to put up some big RBI numbers as a result. But I'm a big fan of his, and just really filling out that rest of the defensive outfield with some speed out there. Sign me up. I'm all for it. I think he's going to be a big piece of this puzzle this year.
CJ, I know somebody that will agree with you on Easton Winfield. My guy, Coach Ty Harrington, he knows all about what the Fun Belt is about in baseball. And if you can get it done in the Fun Belt, you can get it done in a lot of different leagues. I'll tell you what, Blake, a guy you and I have talked about, and I know you mentioned him on ontexasfootball.com. Man, the body transformation Will Gasparino has undergone is, you looked at that frame, it's like, man, is he ever going to add weight? He's added 15 to 20 pounds of he's packed lean muscle on that frame. We asked him this week, he's like, how'd you add that much? He's like, a lot of milkshakes late at night, a lot of Chick-fil-A nuggets, but he said he was eating upwards of like 4,500, 5,000 calories a day trying to put weight on. So he's, Blake, you've had the numbers, put him up, because I think you look at what he did last year. There was a point he got off to a really slow start last year, but you look at it, ended up with a really good freshman year. But I think Will Gasparino this year, I think he is going to be in for a massive year. Patrolling center field. I think CJ, we saw that inter squad the first day when they got back for practice, when poor Jared Spencer, as effective as I think he's going to be, he hung a slider and Will deposited that thing about 430 feet to dead center. So he's added some power. The speed is there. All the stuff that made him a guy that was probably going to be a top 40-ish pick in the draft, but he decided he wanted to play college baseball. He wanted to come to Texas. His father is in the Dodgers front office, but played at Oklahoma State. So the Sunday game for the Gasparino family is going to be a big deal. His dad's coming into town for that one. But, that's a family. Guys, they love college baseball. The Gasparinos love college baseball. Will didn't really have any thoughts about going pro. He wanted to play college ball, wanted to play at Texas. So I just think, with Max Blue coming back, CJ, you mentioned Winfield. I just feel like Will Gasparino is a guy that, between his defense, his ability to run, and the power he's added, I think he's going to be if he's not an all SEC performer, I'll be very surprised.
And I'm going to go the opposite way than both of you and go Ruger Riojas, the UTSA transfer. Of course, on the mound, they're expecting a lot of big things from him, from what I hear. We talked about him over the last couple of videos that we've done, kind of being in that Evan Aschenbeck role that we saw from Evan at Texas A&M. So just every return from anybody that I've spoken to, just really high remarks. Obviously we said it, I think last week, that you're not going to see him be a starter or a closer. But I really feel like his impact is going to be felt in a very positive way, I might add, for Texas fans. So excited to see what he has there.
Yeah, he's got the demeanor too, Blake. I think it's real important to point out. He's added a couple pitches, fastball slider guy, but he's added a little bit of a splitter. Is also working on some other stuff. I think it change up. So, adding to his repertoire, but he's a guy, local kid from Wimberley, grew up going to the Dish. Makes me feel old because we asked him this week, hey, what was your first memory of Texas baseball? It was Cody Clemens going deep in the Friday game against TCU in 2018. I'm like, well, my first Texas memory was, Calvin Murray and Brooks Kiesnick. So it makes me feel like I'm getting really old. But no, he's I just like his mentality, man. That's a guy that's going to go out there and compete his tail off. Plus, it helps when you can compete and you can, run it up there in the mid 90s and you got some secondary pitches to go with it. So he's going to be a really big part of this thing.
Definitely. All right, guys, before we close, I do got a couple of insider notes, if you will. One of the players I get asked about the most is true freshman Jonah Williams, and for good reason, 2-sport star, that type of deal. But, Jonah has been rehabbing an injury. We were even asked today on Coffee and Football, will he play this weekend? The answer is no. I wouldn't expect it anytime soon, but I was told a positive development here that he is now doing some light throwing, which is a change from, about 10 days ago when he wasn't allowed to do so. So that's great news for not only Jonah, but for Texas baseball and football as well. And then I've also been asked this week about Mia Scott from the #1 Texas softball program. And she was held out late last weekend as they opened up play last weekend. But it was more precautionary. She wasn't at 100% last weekend. They didn't figure there was any need whatsoever to risk it, given the teams that they were playing at the time. And that's not a knock on those teams. It just is what it is. But she will be out there this weekend starting today for the home opener. I believe it's Texas Tech is the #8 Texas Tech is the late game. And then Maryland, I think at 4:00 today as well. So wanted to get both of those out there. But yeah, that's going to do it for today's episode of Bases Loaded right here on OTF. Jeff, CJ, thank you both for joining me once again. And we'll be back same time, same place next weekend.